This is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. My co-host is Ian Rivers, and we have another special guest joining the pod. Ian, it's Lucas, manager of the Beaver Territory Twitter page. Lucas, we're excited to have you on the show. We've had some interactions with you on Twitter, and we know you're a follower of the podcast, which we really love the follow, and we love following you and all the content that you put out there. So welcome onto the pod, and how's it going?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Going good. Beautiful day here in Brainerd, Minnesota. So getting ready for this weekend's games. Just finished up listening to the coach's show, and yeah, ready for some Beaver hockey.
Absolutely. It'll be nice, hopefully, to get a rebound after a pretty disappointing weekend. The first sweep on the negative end of the season. And I think I only got a chance to watch the Friday game. Saturday, I was watching, I guess we'll call it a horror film for better, lack of a better term. But
I don't know. I thought the Jaguars game was pretty exciting.
Let's stick to Beaver sports, huh, CJ?
Congrats to Bemidji State alum Trevor Bulkey, manager of the Jaguars.
Absolutely. It's good that one of them, somebody's happy about what happened. But I thought they played well enough to win Friday. There's a couple of questionable refereeing decisions early in that game. I think I only needed about half of a replay to determine that was a high stick on that first goal. And Bowling Green kept themselves in the game, and we can't blame officiating entirely. The third period, there wasn't really that much that went wrong in the officiating department, but it sucks to come out of this with absolutely nothing. Even if you can get that into overtime and a shootout or something and, get a win and get 2 points, you feel like you're still in that race. But right now, we still are. There's plenty of time left, and we still have 4 games in hand, but we're 10 points back on Bowling Green. We need some help from somebody else. And they got a tough Tommy's team coming up this weekend, so we could get it. Like I said, there's plenty of hockey left to be played this year, but that feels a little bad. But I think, I just saw a couple minutes ago, you tweeted out that Ross Armour is coming back. So hopefully that means good things for the offense and the face-offs.
Yeah, face-offs for sure. Eric Martin kind of got thrown into that role. It would be nice to see him back on the wing now this weekend. Like you said, Ross Armour should be back this weekend. Unfortunately, Adam Fleming will be out for multiple weeks now. We just learned that tonight. So there will still be some line juggling there with that. And like you said, we're not out of this race yet. 10 points back, 4 games in hand. It's unfortunate because last weekend we did end up getting some help from other teams in the conference. You look at Lake State going up to Ferris traveling to Lake State, dropping 3 points there. Michigan Tech dropped 3 points to St. Thomas. So, this weekend again, you'll be cheering for the Tommies. You'll be cheering for Lake State as they play Mankato. And the other series is Ferris State and Michigan Tech. And, you got Michigan Tech 1 point ahead of you or 3 points ahead of you. I got to double check that. But and then you got Ferris State a couple points behind you. So, kind of hard to cheer for either of those teams. Probably want to split there. Might be the best case scenario.
Yeah, Michigan Tech currently 3 points ahead of us with 2 games in hand, and Ferris State 2 points behind us, but they are equal with 14 games. And, we've got a tough Northern Michigan team. They're playing a little bit down. I think they're 500 on the year. They were picked the only other team that got a first place vote in the preseason coaches poll in the CCHA. And so I think for them, this is a pretty disappointing season. We went into Marquette and took 3 points earlier this year. And I think, it's another one of those games that you drop the goal within the last 2 minutes. And if you could just hold on and at least get 4 points out of the weekend, you're feeling really good. But of course, you're going to give up some of those. It's just the rate that they've been coming. Those goals in the last 2 minutes has been frustrating this year. But I think this is another good opportunity. If you really are going to want to keep yourself alive in this race at home, your backs are kind of against the wall. You haven't won a game since December 16th, I believe it was, against Mankato. This is a really big series for them. They need to get at least, I would think 5 points out of this weekend to keep themselves in that race, and then hope to get a little help elsewhere.
Yeah, totally. It's you're on a 3-game losing streak right now. You're winless in your last 4, 5 if you count the exhibition. It's starting to look a lot like last year around this time, unfortunately. Last year they went through a similar stretch where they lost 8 of 10. Completely took themselves out of any chance of an at-large bid. I would say the chance of an at-large bid is pretty much already gone for us this year. So yeah, I mean, position yourself in conference, and then that conference tournament's crucial, and you need to secure home ice. Ferris State's right behind us. But I also don't want that 4 seed, because that 4 seed means you're going to have to play Ferris probably in the first round.
Yeah, I think there's a big discrepancy between, even 2 and 3 when you're looking at the teams that you would play in the first round, combined with the fact that you would get a second round home game on the semifinals. I don't want to play either Ferris or Northern Michigan, and as good as St. Thomas has looked this year, I feel confident against them in a 3-game series that we could probably take 2 out of 3 at the very least on home ice and advance. And so hopefully the Beavers can at least get that 2 spot. But like you said, the bare minimum's got to be getting that 4 seed so that we can at least get a home series in the first round. And then, last year we went into Houghton and upset the Huskies there, and then a wildly controversial game in the CCHA championship that really we could have sent ourselves to the tournament. So, I mean, I think the benefit of the doubt is with an inconsistent team like this that we've seen out of Bemidji is, the fact that semifinal game, and it's not a series, it's a game, and the championship game, I think that kind of benefits us, with the inconsistency we've seen, especially out of the offense, only having to win 1 game, I like our chances with that a little bit better, but I guess I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We still got 6 weeks left of the season before we even get to that spot. But yeah, the season as a whole, I guess it's gone about as you would expect so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bemidji State was 4th in the preseason poll as voted on by the coaches, and they're 4th right now. I mean, you could say that they've actually, overperformed quite a bit in that first half. And like I said, we have a lot of games in hand still. I mean, the 2 on Michigan Tech, you have a good chance of passing them this weekend if you do take 5 points. Games in hand with Bowling Green and Minnesota State still.
Yep, 4 in hand on Bowling Green and 2 in hand on Minnesota State. We could end up jumping, if we won all of those games, we could jump both teams by 2 points, but we would have to be perfect in those games. And that's something we haven't seen out of this team other than a December weekend in Mankato. So, and even then we only took 5 out of 6. So we have yet to take all 6. And that's, I mean, it's so hard to sweep in college hockey, especially now with the CCHA as good as it is. Even Lake Superior State, you look at 4-18-2 overall, but they're 3-12-1 in the conference. They've beaten us, and like you said, they won this weekend. So they're not going to just fall over for you. They're not going to give you wins. And I think I brought it up. Even when Ferris State only won 1 game, it was against the Beavers. So we can lose to anybody, and sweeping is hard in college hockey. But I do think this team, like I've talked about, they're young offensively, and the leadership defensively from Zmolik and Loft and Elias Rosen, who had a 3-point weekend this weekend. I think that's big. And then having a goaltender as good as Scholl in the net, even though he's looked a little inconsistent at times this year, I still think he's very talented. And this team's just going to grow together. The offense, I wish there was one guy that you could have step up and like I said, lean on. We need a goal. Put this line out there. They can go get us that goal. It's kind of coming from anywhere you can get it. And that is a little frustrating, but it's also a good thing to be a little bit, I don't want to say deep, consistent across the board offensively, but I wish we had that line that we could just throw out there when we're, down a goal to Bowling Green and we need to tie the game up at the end.
Yeah, early on in the season, that was the Mitchell Martin, Eric Martin, Yuri Bison in line. I think he was the 3rd guy on that line. But a couple of those guys have kind of slowed down in terms of production. You look at Mitchell Martin with, I think, 2 goals in the last 7 games, maybe only 2 points. Eric Martin's on a 5-game scoring drought. Starting to get a little thin there. I mean, Leighton Rhodes been huge. Him stepping up and then producing at the level as he has as a freshman is huge for this team. Fleming looked like he was starting to click. Unfortunately, now with that injury, who knows what's going to happen there. Jakub Lewandowski, before, had a really good series against Minnesota State, where he was named forward of the week in the CCHA. Didn't play very well in Ohio against Bowling Green, but he's still got the talent there to produce as well offensively.
Yeah, Leighton Road, freshman, second in the team in points with 16. And 16's not necessarily through 22 games, something that you're like writing home about, but nobody else is really stepping up. We have, I think this is 7 guys with over 10 points this year. And then 9, 8, 7. So there's plenty of guys that are getting them. It's just you don't have that one area that you can lean on to get it. Luckily for us, our defenders are pretty willing to step up offensively whenever there's an opportunity, and that does help the offense at times. So hopefully we can see a little bit more consistency. I just keep hoping that they'll turn that corner. This will be the weekend that we'll see that line break out and score 4 goals as a line on the weekend and really help us secure some victories. But I don't want to hog too much of the spotlight. CJ, you got anything to add about this team?
No, I think you guys have pretty much just hit what this team has been. It's been kind of consistently inconsistent. And like you said, Lucas, I mean, predicted to finish 4th, and right now sitting 4th, they're kind of where they're at. But Lucas, I wanted to know, coming into this year, you talked about kind of, where they're at in the standings and whatnot. But in terms of the makeup of this team and kind of what your expectation was out of this unit as a whole, what are some things that you saw this year that have kind of surprised you? And what are some things kind of for better or worse that you kind of have taken away from the season so far?
I was impressed with the transfer portal pickups that we made. I mean, Mitchell Martin obviously had that very strong start to the season. Jackson Judding, he's only a junior. He'll still be here next year. He's probably the best center. I mean, best win percentage on faceoffs on the team right now, playing pretty well as a centerman. Had that unfortunate puck deflection off his skate that led to the 1 power play goal for Bowling Green last weekend. Caden Pickering's been fine. I kind of expected a little bit more in terms of production from him. He's at -9 right now, underperforming as compared to his years at St. Lawrence. The freshmen though have been huge, especially with Leighton Road, Ben Fleming, and the young defenseman. Patrick Setosari's playing well. Mitchell Wolf. There's a lot of bright spots coming up through those underclassmen right now. With those underclassmen. And Matthias Scholl, I wasn't really sure. I thought last year he played pretty inconsistently. He kind of overextended himself a lot in that. And this year he's playing like a top 5 goaltender in the country.
And looking at this team and just kind of into the, like you said, the young guys stepping up and just kind of seeing that development, what does the future look like for Beaver hockey beyond this year? Is this a group of guys that can grow together, or do we still kind of have to wait and see before we think we have a nice little core for the next few years?
I think it's a really good core. I mean, I'm excited for these next couple of recruiting classes coming in. They look really promising as well. It'll be interesting to see with the transfer portal how many losses we sustain with that and who we can bring in. I mean, right now, you have 3 graduate players are going to be gone next year. You have 6 seniors, a lot of depth guys, but also your top 3 defensemen in that senior class. How many of them are going to come back? They're all eligible for 1 more year with the COVID year, but there's a lot of spots on this roster to fill for next season, it looks like. So it's good that we have these young guys playing and getting that experience. And like you said, I think they're going to grow together really well. And I'm excited for the next couple of seasons here. It was a good rebuild.
You mentioned the transfer portal, and then I'll just be quick, and then you can put your thing in. The transfer portal, how do you think that's going to impact? Because you mentioned you got some good ones this year. Just kind of how does that impact college hockey this year? And do you think it's for the betterment, or do you think it's for the detriment of BSU hockey kind of going forward?
It's hard to say. I would say so far it's been a net positive for Bemidji. We did lose Lucas Sillinger, and that's a huge loss, obviously, but the guys we brought in have made up some of that production fairly well. In future aspect, or going forward here, that 5th year COVID option that players have, you got a couple more seasons of that. So the transfer portal is going to be full of players looking for spots. It'll be interesting to see what the coaching staff strategy is in terms of, are they going to bring in 1 year play, guys on that 5th year only and try and get 1 year out of them, or are they going to look for some of the underclassmen transfer as well?
Yeah, I think the transfer portal is, you can make an argument that it goes either way because, you think that, oh, it's just going to help all the bigger schools because there's going to be a guy like Lucas Sillinger who had such a great year as a sophomore, and then, oh, he can jump to bigger and brighter pastures. But there's also, you got to think about how many guys the Gophers bring in a year. They bring in like 9-10 forwards every year as freshmen, and every one of them has the expectation of being a top 6 forward right away. And then when they're not, there's been plenty of those guys who transfer out and they go to smaller schools. And so it kind of balances itself out in a sense. I don't like it because it makes it harder for somebody like me who doesn't follow it in the off season quite as well. I get here, September, I'm looking at the roster and I'm like, where did he come from? I never saw anything about this, and where did he go? That sort of thing. And you do a good job of at least with recruiting, keeping me posted on all that stuff. That's been very beneficial. You brought up the freshman class this year and how well they've been doing. And it feels like this is the second time that I've seen a group of freshman forwards come in since I've really been following BSU that have kind of, not necessarily been elite right away or, scoring 20 goals a season, but you kind of think like this is going to be a good group of guys to lean on going forward. And that 2017-18 class of freshmen with Brendan Harris, Somoza, Charlie Combs, and Aaron Miller, I could tell right away that those guys were going to be pretty good, and Combs ended up transferring out, going to Michigan State towards the end of his career. But Miller and Somoza and Harris all played a big role in that, season where we ended up winning an NCAA tournament game against Wisconsin. So hopefully if the future holds the same fate, we can get these guys some experience and they can just end up being the offense that helps carry us into the future.
Yeah, I agree. And for the transfer portal specifically, there's a lot of good resources out there if you do want to stay on top of that. Not to promote Gopher fans too much, but Gopher Puck Live does a great job keeping track of transfers on their transfer portal page. And there are some benefits of getting those players from those higher rated programs. You look at a guy like Jack Works at Michigan Tech, who has 6 goals and 6 assists on the year. He was at Denver for the past 2 seasons, played 10 games last year, didn't have a point. He gets a fresh start and is able to produce right away for a new team that's competing, for a McNaughton Cup like us.
Yeah, and that's something that I think Bemidji State could really take to their advantage is the fact of you can get some of those guys and bring them in and give them the playing time right away. And so that's something where it can, the downside is you have those guys like a Sillinger who can just leave when if they're young, have a good year and decide they want to get to that next step. But, like in a way, and maybe this isn't the right angle to have it, but I think that means if you can get a young guy, have him come in and then he transfers out, I don't think that's necessarily a detriment to your program. I think that's good that you can bring in those guys and develop them, and maybe even a selling point to some of those young guys or some of those older guys who come in and say, we can make guys better. It's kind of like, with jobs, like they always talk about with hiring, why do we want to hire you if you think you're going to leave in 2 years for bigger and better things? And it's like, it's probably a good thing because it means you brought in somebody good and they did a really good job. So that's kind of how I look at the transfer portal. I think Bemidji State, if effectively, can use it really, really well.
Well, Territory recruits so differently than any other coach in Minnesota. He's got a specific brand of hockey that he plays, and he looks for guys that aren't maybe as talented as the guys that St. Cloud and Mankato and Duluth are bringing in every year, because, it's hard to compete with 5 other schools in your state. And then there's so many other schools, in Michigan now that are on the up and up. And so he looks for those guys that are going to fit his system well. And he goes after those guys. So it's such a different recruiting plan from Territory that I find it hard to follow what he wants. Obviously he wants a tough defender and a guy that's willing to play both ways. But, he's got such a different game plan on the recruiting trail than guys like Bob Motzko and, St. Cloud State and Mankato.
Yeah, especially when it comes to size. He's not looking for the biggest guys out there. He believes in team speed. He believes in that agility to close down on players. And yeah, it is a lot different. He definitely tries to recruit the best players in the state and unfortunately at Bemidji, we're just not able to get them. You look at Leighton Rhodes' brother Nolan, who's at White Bear Lake and just committed to St. Cloud. I know Bemidji State was high on him. And one thing Bemidji State does really well too is recruiting overseas. I mean, European players are bringing in Jakub Lewandowski, bringing in Alexander Lundeman, Elias Rose, and those guys. I mean, that's a market that college hockey is starting to look at more and more. And you can find some really good players that want to come to a place like Bemidji over there.
And the future of recruiting, even in this area, is going to get tougher. Like we talked about those Michigan schools. Now St. Thomas is D1. Augustana is going to be D1 pretty quick as well. I mean, the competition just even around the Midwest is just getting increasing. And Augustana and St. Thomas have the infrastructure to get really good really quickly. So that's something also that's kind of on the radar.
Yeah, both brand new facilities that are being built. I mean, and then they're going to be gorgeous. Those are going to be nice rinks to go down. Looking forward to traveling to both.
It's really interesting that development and where things have gone. And like Ian mentioned, Lucas, you do a good job tracking all this movement, the transfers, and who Bemidji State has incoming. And that's something in college hockey that's especially tough just on the way college hockey recruiting is. And you mentioned a little bit of that, but we'll give you the floor here, kind of talk a little bit about Beaver Territory, how it got its start, and just kind of how that page has grown.
Yeah, so I mean, Beaver Territory is coming up on its first 1-year anniversary. I started it at the end of January last year. I graduated from Bemidji State in 2012, followed college hockey a little bit while I was in school, and, kind of a casual fan, when I left. A couple of years ago, I discovered Tech Hockey Guide, which is Michigan Tech's fan news site, joined their Discord, and I just thought it was kind of a cool way that they were getting fans involved in the team there, and I decided to try and replicate that with Bemidji State. So it launched, with Beaver Territory about 1 year ago. Primarily right now, I do a weekly series preview for the upcoming opponent. Like you said, I try to keep track of all the recruiting news that I hear. So we have a list of all the recruits for both men's and women's teams, some future roster projections based on those commitments and when I expect them to come into Bemidji. And then, I try to stay active on Twitter and social media. Twitter handles Beaver Territory because Beaver Territory was already taken when I made that account. And just try and post anything that I find about Bemidji State hockey and that going on there.
And you mentioned a BSU graduate in 2012. You were around when the Sanford Center opened, just around that timeline. What was it like being a student in that kind of era of Beaver hockey?
That was fun. So my first year, I transferred into Bemidji State as a sophomore in 2009. And that was the last year of the John Glass Fieldhouse. So that was my first experience of college hockey. And that was so much fun. Those crowds, that environment. The Sanford Center was amazing when that opened. I remember having to, do overnight for student season tickets. You had to sleep overnight in, I can't remember which hall exactly, but in order to get in line for those, like it was the hottest ticket in Bemidji. Stands were filled, almost every night. Teams weren't great once they transferred to the WCHA, and that started to hurt attendance kind of by my senior year. But those first couple of years when that building was packed, that was so much fun.
And that's
I remember following it closely, indirectly, because I grew up a college hockey fan. I watched the Gophers almost every weekend, from the time I was like 8 years old. And so I got to see Bemidji State play every once and then, whenever they played Minnesota. And it was really cool seeing that. And then, eventually deciding, hey, that's where I'm going to go to school myself. And of course, at that point, the Sanford Center was already up and running. But, I wish I could have been there to experience some of those raucous fan sections. There's been a couple weekends where we get a really good crowd in there, McNaughton Cup run in 2016-17 against Michigan Tech, especially that weekend was rocking. But other than that, it's not been the same ever since. And hopefully we can get this program consistent enough to keep fans coming in the building. I know that COVID was a huge setback for a lot of programs, in college hockey with fan attendance, but hopefully we can start to come up with that again.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, Ian, when we had the radio show and just when we were on campus. Like there'd be times where, the student section wasn't quite as full. The crowds weren't quite as fun. And that was around the time when they nixed the deal with PBS because they wanted more people to go to the rink. And I mean, that whole era of Beaver hockey, like I wish I was able to attend some of those ones at the
Man,
Glass. I think
that sucked. My parents loved it. They watched every game, and
I
my
would
mom
watch
was
it
like,
from my home.
"Oh my gosh, I saw you in the stands!" Like, yeah, they only have like 5 camera angles, so if you stand in the same spot every night, you're gonna get on TV. But yeah, she loved that, and I loved it because whenever I went home, for the weekend, I didn't have to pay for a hockey subscription. I could just watch it on my own TV. But that was a really crushing to my family when they took that off PBS.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but one of the most frustrating things is, I did the road trip to Michigan Tech this year, went to Houghton for the 2 away games there. And I think tickets were, it cost me about half as much to attend a weekend series there as it does at Bemidji. And it's just really frustrating with some of those ticket prices right now. And I don't know if that's driving people away. I mean, the on ice performance is there, I feel like most years. So I wish, I think there's things that administration could do to help get that building full again.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Tech has had such a consistent program as long as we have, with the WCHA days. And so what's the difference? Why are we charging so much more than this program? I agree with that. But yeah, I hope that we can restore that building because it's such a nice, it's
So
gotta
nice.
be top 5 facility in terms of actual rink, just with how new it is in college hockey. Obviously the Ralph is like up there unmatched by nearly anything. I got an experience with that this year for the first time, but man, I wish we could get that place. It doesn't even have to be sold out, man. Just get it over 60-70%.
Yeah, I mean, even walking the halls, I got to do stats for a couple of the hockey games, got to walk through the halls, walk in the locker rooms, the coaches' offices. It's a beautiful facility, and it's something that I'm sure BSU uses to their advantage in recruiting and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's not Mariucci, it's not the Ralph, but it's for what Bemidji has, it's a beautiful facility. And that's the thing, is Beaver hockey is so fun, and there is a passion for that. And it just, again, like I think that's why we do this podcast. And Lucas, that's why you do your page. You want to grow BSU hockey and Bemidji State hockey and try and get that out there to people. And that's been really fun. So we really appreciate you being on the pod, Lucas. We got probably about a minute here. Any last thoughts you want to talk about?
No, I mean, we can quickly touch base on some of the recruits coming in if you'd like. I mean, we have, a really promising recruiting class coming in here in 2023, headlined by Eric Holtkamp. He was just rated in the NHL Central Scouting list as the 127th best prospect in the upcoming NHL draft, for the upcoming draft. Neutral Zone has him ranked as the number 9 player in 2004 birth years. And yeah, he's going to be a defenseman that this program can really build around for the next 4 years. So that's a really exciting player. Also, and you're going to have to replace Kyle Luft, Elias Rosen, and Wilson Molek. You also have Gustav Ozilic coming in from Latvia, who just finished up with the World Juniors. Probably the best Latvian player at the World Juniors this year. So I think when you're